Back at you once more in January, a productive month for Nebraska football, maybe not so much on the basketball side. This is the Pick Six Podcast with the Omaha World-Herald. I'm sitting here with Sam McEwen. I'm Evan Bland. It's been a couple weeks. Tom Chattel out today. He's doing some sleuthing, some reporting in Lincoln. So it's Sam and me, a little two-man weave coming at you here in late January. I feel like we got a lot to talk about today, Sam. We're going to touch on Nebraska basketball's tailspin, 6-game losing streak as of this recording. When does the madness end? And then a lot of football discussion as well. The portal looks like it's finally coming to a close. Where's Nebraska's place in the new rev share era that's coming out? Salaries, all the rest. And then some guys showing out pretty well at the Senior Bowl here this week too. And I think we're going to have some fun with a little 3-and-3. So Sam and I are going to touch on some transfers that we feel like maybe are the most interesting additions for Nebraska, some high school ads as well that have come in, maybe got overlooked in that early January signing period. So a lot to get to today, Sam. And I guess we can start probably with basketball.
That's where Tom's today.
That's where
talking
Tom
to Fred Hoiberg at 11.
Hanging out with Fred.
Good to see you, Evan.
It's good to see you too.
Happy New Year. I don't know. I think we've seen each other in person
since then.
Okay. All right.
Knowing what you know about Nebraska basketball, how surprising has this skid been? Just the struggles that they have, especially relative to the start that they had to the season.
So I'll start with, I think, where just a couple of scenes that I've kind of seen, snippets that I can gather from over the last month. One, I think I've been to every home game in that stretch. I have access to some tickets. I take my kids. I have access to buy some tickets in 200 section. Taking my kids to those. So I think I've been to all of those, and that's been interesting just to go and listen to fans and what they have to say. And then I was there for the USC game to cover a story on St. Thomas, who plays for USC but graduated from Millard North. And so kind of saw a little bit of the post game and all of that. Part of what I can say is that the fan support is still really, really good. Our former boss, Thad Livingston, was up here for a while. Of course, Thad is connected to Hunter Salas, who plays at Wake Forest. So Thad gets to see a lot of ACC basketball environments. And he went to the USC game on last Thursday. And he was like, this environment here is awesome compared to some of the ACC environments. Like, there's a master of ceremonies, and he's out there, and the people are going crazy when somebody makes a putt for a Porsche. And, the audio-visual presentation is really good, and the fans are in it, and the music is good, and the DJ is solid. And USC doesn't experience this at their home arena. They get 4,000 fans a game, USC. And Nebraska gets something like, 14. Generally. And so, USC has a fraction of these fans. UCLA has fewer fans. And so Nebraska's fan support and going into PBA and trying to win there is extremely hard, whether the students are there or not. And I appreciate the students. But no, whether they're there or not, it's a very hard environment to play in. So there's that. Then there's the fact that they lost 2 of those games to 2 not great teams. Rutgers and USC are not great. There's that. Then there's just the demeanor of Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary after the USC loss. That was 2 disappointed guys. They were just devastated, you could tell. And Bryce was very hard on himself, and Juwan wasn't hard on himself, but he was disappointed too. And then I think of the way that they started the games. And when you play this sport, I think you have to have a couple of games where you just you score a first-round knockout. And you may not win the game by 15, but you're up 15 early. And that has happened twice to Nebraska in the road games at Purdue and Wisconsin. And Nebraska lost those games by 30-something and 28. When Nebraska's had home starts, they led by 1 over UCLA. They trailed USC, and I think they led Rutgers by 4. And they're just not knocking teams out at PBA. Their starts have been really poor. They can't make shots. He has now tinkered with 3 different starting lineups, I think, in the last 4 games, Evan. Mm-hmm. And not one of those does include Connor Essegian. And I don't know why. I think they're trying to hold on to an identity that they just may not be able to pull off, where it's like we are going to be uber defensive and we are going to win games Tim Miles style 67-56. I just don't know if they can do it. The defense has not been there. They have given up a lot of points. I mean, they gave up 100 to Purdue, 85 to Rutgers. They played well at Maryland in front of, again, a very sparse crowd. 78 to USC, and then most recently Sunday, 83 to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin could have scored 100 if Nebraska hadn't slowed it down. So the defense hasn't been there. They're searching. Is it surprising? Talking to Wilson Moore, our beat writer, and he has the Half Court Press podcast, he'll probably talk about this. He's like, 3 weeks ago I was covering a good team. And he didn't mean like that Nebraska's a bad team, but just 3 weeks ago Nebraska, is Nebraska going to make the NCAA tournament? It was, what's the seed going to be?
The seed, yeah.
And can they win a game or two? And that's not the story now. The chances of them making the NCAA tournament really depend on going on an equally impressive run as the losing streak they've just had. And so the concerns that you have about the way that Nebraska's playing and the way it manifests itself, and the fact that they're leaning on a strength that I'm not sure is a strength, that they're not starting their best shooter when they go take the floor. There have been times this season where they have had one 3-point shooting threat on the floor to start the game, and that ain't enough. It's just not. And so I think there's a lot of different variables in there, and I wrote about it for my Monday Rewind. When you live life transfer portal hall to transfer portal hall, you're rolling the dice. You're really not. Here's what I would say, and this is something that I've heard a little bit of, like, well, these guys are coming here, and maybe they did shoot 28, 29, 30% from three from where they were, but once they come here, Fred will get it figured out. With all due respect, I just don't think that happens. When you bring in a transfer portal class, Evan, you are bringing in the coaching they've already had, and maybe, in the case of Derek Walker, maybe you can shift some of that. But the reality is when you bring in a 4-year player, how much are you going to change his shot? Right. He's been coached by people for 4 years. How much are you going to change Braxton Mia? How much are you going to change Andrew Morgan? How much are you going to change Aaron Ulis? They are who they are. And so when you live transfer portal class to transfer portal class, the idea that you're going to transform these players that's just iffy. You're basically buying and signing what they were at their former stop, and you hope that they develop into an elite player. The way that Derek Walker did. Maybe Berke Buchengel can get there by the time he's a senior. I'm not giving up on him at all, but that's the challenge. They have to find a way to either evaluate slightly better in the portal, or they got to sign some high school kids and develop them their way. How many kids are coming into this program and learning nothing but what Fred Hoiberg teach them? Only Nick Janowski and Braden Frager. You got to bring more guys in who they're not hearing any other voice other than Fred and Nate Lenzer. And sometimes you're having to blend what Fred teaches them with what they've already learned from 3 other coaches.
And that's really hard to do at this point for Nebraska. I mean, they've tried the high school thing. It's hard to retain. It's hard to develop, especially in this era.
Fred has not really tried the high school thing, no, not really. It's been mostly
at this point in his career here, though. Do you go down that road and say, hey, this is going to be a 3-year build, and we're going to bring in a nucleus of guys and hope that they stay and they don't leave if they improve? It's a tough spot.
Here's what I would have said. I would have said that if you could have gotten an NCAA tournament year out of this team, maybe you could have gone back and said, okay, at the very least, our portal halls are going to be young guys, and we're going to build we're going to put them together with Janowski and Frager, and we're going to build it slowly. And we're going to go get a young post who we don't know how good he's going to be, but we're going to do it that way. If this team doesn't make the tournament, then I think you're looking, at next season being extremely important for the coach. But, at some point, you've lived in Lincoln your whole life or close to. I mean, you live in Council Bluffs, but you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying. At some point, this isn't really about the coach. It's about the program. Why can't Nebraska be Iowa State? Why? I'm not going to screw with Kansas. Kansas is unique. Yeah. It's a gem. It's been that way for a long time. They founded the sport. Kansas is different. I'm not saying Kansas. Why can't they be Iowa State? And that's a question I was going to ask Tom if he were here, because he knows Big 8 basketball and he knows Johnny Orr and all that. Why can't Nebraska be that? Like, Lincoln's a cool enough town compared to Ames.
No doubt.
So,
The weather's a wash.
you know, and I looked at where the kids at Iowa State, by the way, Iowa State's third in the country, lost Arizona in overtime on Monday, but you know, they're going to be a number 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. I looked at where those guys were from, and you know, one's from Ames, okay, but like they're from Kansas City and St. Louis and Minneapolis, and it's not like, you know, they're buying the team the way that Indiana did, and it's not working for Indiana.
Right.
At some point, it does become a question of like, why can't Nebraska be that program? Like, what is holding it back? Is it the fans are too supportive? I don't know. Like, is it that football is the shadow over it, and it can't find its own airspace?
But like
it's
you
just
said,
hard for me to figure out.
That there is an interest. People show up. They have
Yeah.
fun. And maybe that's the thing. Like it kind of reminds me of being a Cubs fan, and forever the ownership wouldn't make changes because they said, well, you know, people are going to fill Wrigley Field anyway. They're going to show up. It's going to be a great atmosphere. If the team doesn't win, well, they're going to come next time.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't sense that apathy with the current administration. Maybe in the past. I know our old colleague Lee Barfneck used to be critical of the administration in the 90s and the early 2000s about that. But I think a lot's changed in that regard too. And with this team, I think the frustrating thing is, you know, you look at talent, you look at effort, and maybe we overrated the talent based on the start they had against a softer schedule. But the effort's the disappointing part. Like, you saw it early. You saw it in the Creighton game. You saw it in these other moments where the closeouts were crisp, the defense was solid, and you say, okay, if they play hard like this, like, they could max out in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
And now it's just the effort hasn't been there. You mentioned the body language. It's just
Fred says the body
not a great
language is
place.
good.
Well, I mean, we saw some of that.
After the USC game, those guys were clearly down. Yeah.
I mean, it's tough.
And I didn't think, based on that, I was like, man, I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow's going to – well, I don't know what the Wisconsin game will look like. And then they came out and they got blitzed 19-2.
And what's the get-right moment at this point in the Big Ten? I mean, is it Illinois coming to town on Thursday? Is it going to the West Coast and playing Oregon and Washington?
Might be.
And I guess you can say that they can flip it at any time. You know, Minnesota had a big win the other night. Like, it can happen. But, man, it's just it's hard to look at this team and say they're going to pull out of this thing given the schedule and what we've seen.
I think that the game at Oregon gives them an opportunity because there won't be a lot of fans there. It'll be a quiet arena. It'll probably be half full. And then, yeah, I think they can beat Washington at Washington. Washington only has one win in the league, so there's your spot. And Washington's not very good. They're not. They're worse than Nebraska. So, you know, I don't know. It's almost like, though, okay, we can talk about the tailspin or the meltdown or whatever you want to call it, but like, at what point do they just have like 3 or 4 seasons in a row where you're not wondering like what the heck happened? You know, there was a tweet put out by Caleb Henry, and it was a very good tweet. He works at 1400 about even if Nebraska lost the rest of its games this season, its 3-season stretch would be second only to the final 3 seasons of Miles and then Doc's final 3 seasons in the Big 12 over the last 20 years. Basically saying, you know, well, look, Hoiberg's had enough success that it's equal to, and that's all true. That was a good tweet. It's a factual tweet. Miles also got fired at the end of that 3rd-year run.
He did.
And Doc got fired the year after that 3-year run, which is to say that, like, if that's the comparison piece, then basically what you're saying is Nebraska basketball needs, you know, like, has to accept that it's not very good and it may never be very good because – and the question is, okay, if that's true and, like, you have to just kind of be happy with what it is, then why pay the coach $4.25 million? Why not do what Ohio State did? Ohio State let Chris Holtmann go, and they paid Jake Diebler whatever they're paying Jake Diebler. I don't know. And I'm not saying that Hoiberg should be let go. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, why invest all that money? Like, why not say we're going to invest less money in the coaching salaries and we're going to try to put more money into the player stuff and find a way? Because, you know, as I look at I'm doing a database on Big Ten athletic department reports.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 11 of them, I think. And according to this, Nebraska's revenue last year in basketball was pretty good. It was $17,513,324. That's pretty good. And that encapsulates all of last season, 2023-2024.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it isn't as good as Michigan State, which was $22 million. And Illinois, and this was because of a gift they got from a donor, was $30 million.
Wow.
You know where the money's going at Illinois, though. They had a great basketball team last year, and they got a good one again.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of know where it's going. And they spent more money in basketball than Wisconsin did. They spent equal money to Oregon. They spent more money than Penn State. They didn't spend more money than Illinois. And they didn't spend more money than Michigan State. So there's a gap there for sure, but, like, you know, you may as well just have a modest approach. I don't think Nebraska wants a modest approach. They signed Fred Hoiberg to a long contract extension. They're giving him top dollar, a top 25 salary, and yet it feels like what we're supposed to do in this moment is say, well, be happy about what happened last year. You know, just be happy with that. Don't give this guy too hard of a time. I mean, he might leave or something. I'm not sure what the vibe is there.
The bar is so low.
Yeah, it's like
I mean, they've been the worst team.
You don't want to make Fred
since
mad.
They've been there.
Oh man, like, you don't want to. I mean, hey, let's take it easy here. And I'm like, well, okay. Was what happened the last 2 years something that's portable, or was what happened 2 years ago and last year Casey?
Or you just, shuffle up and deal every year with the transfer portal, and maybe you get a good hand, and maybe you don't, and you don't know till it plays out.
Because 2 years ago, Amy and I kind of shared the beat writer role toward the end of the season because Jimmy moved on. He took a different job. So Amy and I were kind of handling it. And so we both watched the last 10 games of the year after their two defensive players got hurt. And the reason they won a lot of those games late, well, Derek Walker, but Casey, he hit a lot of shots. And then the following year, I mean, rink mass was a big part of why they were good, but Casey was there. And he changed defenses. He made everything easier for everybody. So, okay, do you need to find another Casey? We've talked a long time about basketball here, but the point being that, it's almost not even about the losing streak, but, what expectations are good to have. Because it feels like the vibe is, yeah, this isn't where it needs to be, but come on, guys. It's Nebraska. Mm-hmm. If they lost 10 in a row, it'd still be better than they were when Tim Miles was there. Okay. So, the implication of that statement is, and I think it was a good fact. It is a good fact, and I think people are being premature about getting too hard on Fred, but simultaneously, how do you build it? Do you do the portal every year? I mean, they must be. I sure hope they're redshirting Janowski and Frager, both of whom are great three-point shooters for a reason. I hope it's not, well, they weren't very good, so. And I don't think that's why it is. I think they're these guys have real potential, and I hope that there's a desire to build around that. Because if there is, they could help this team. This team. Because what this team is missing is shooting.
They are. They're missing a lot.